It's not always the loudest voice in the room that holds the answer. Sometimes, it's the one that sweeps the floors after everyone else has gone home. No one expected the janitor to speak. No one even knew her name, really. They just called her ma'am, or worse, hey. She was invisible to most, a quiet presence in the background of a buzzing tech firm built on dreams and coffee-fueled innovation. But on a rainy Thursday morning, when everything seemed to be crumbling, her voice cut through the room like lightning in a storm. And in that one moment, everything changed. 3 years ago, NeuroShift Labs had become the rising star of the tech world. A once small AI startup nestled in the heart of Chicago, it had been founded by ambitious, sharp-minded Ivy League graduates with dreams of reshaping the future of machine learning. At the helm was Brian Cade, tall, blonde, and brilliant, with an ego that barely fit through the automatic glass doors every morning. Brian was a genius, no doubt about it. But he had one tragic flaw: he believed intelligence had a look. To him, it wore expensive suits, spoke with confidence, and held degrees from schools with centuries-old crests. And because of that, he failed to see what had been right in front of him for years. The janitor, her name was Helen Monroe, and she was unlike anyone who had ever walked through those pristine, glass hallways. She arrived at 4 a.m. daily, long before the techies and developers poured in with their lattes and bagels. Her hands were worn from years of cleaning, but her eyes held stories. Not just of sorrow or survival, but of brilliance. You see, Helen wasn't always a janitor. 20 years ago, she was a computer engineer. A prodigy in college, she had been offered a position at a research facility that would have launched her straight into the heart of Silicon Valley. But life had a different plan. Her husband was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's. Her youngest daughter was born with a rare neurological condition that demanded full-time care. So Helen walked away from her career without hesitation, putting family before ambition. Years passed. Tragedy knocked hard. Her husband passed. Her daughter's condition worsened. With hospital bills piling up and her degree too old to hold weight in the ever-evolving tech world, Helen took the only job that would let her be near the field she once loved. A janitor at NeuroShift Labs. At first, she just swept floors and emptied bins. But her eyes scanned every whiteboard, every diagram left behind. Late at night, she'd scribble equations into a worn notebook she kept hidden in her locker. She listened to the developers' conversations from the hallway. She absorbed every word, every struggle, and every failed attempt at solving the problem. The problem was a revolutionary AI architecture NeuroShift had been working on for years, an autonomous neural reasoning model that could adapt to ethical decision-making in real time. But the core algorithm had a flaw. It couldn't predict unintended consequences. No matter how many simulations they ran, it always failed one critical test: how to make morally sound decisions in unpredictable human environments. Brian and his team of 20 engineers had tried everything. The board was threatening to pull funding. Investors were backing out. The company that once touched the sky was on the verge of collapse. Then came that Thursday morning. Brian stood at the front of the innovation lab, dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled, and his suit wrinkled like it had lost hope too. "I don't get it," he shouted, slamming a marker against the glass board. 3 years. 3 years and not one of you has cracked it." The room was silent. Every engineer sat in shame, eyes lowered, pretending to take notes. That's when a soft voice came from the back. "Maybe you're asking the wrong question." Everyone turned. Helen stood by the waste bin, mop in one hand, her cleaning cart beside her. Her voice was calm, clear, and steady. Brian blinked. Then smirked. "Oh really? The janitor has the answer?" He laughed, and a few others joined, nervously. Helen didn't flinch. "I've been listening to you all for months," she said. "Your model assumes moral decisions are based solely on logic trees and learned behavior. But humans don't always choose what's logical. We choose based on connection. On empathy. Your AI can mimic human behavior but not human emotion." Brian scoffed. "And how exactly do we teach empathy to a machine?" Helen stepped forward, pulling a worn, spiral-bound notebook from her cart. "I wrote a feedback loop model that connects ethical decision branches to memory clusters. The AI doesn't just analyze outcomes, it remembers the emotional context of previous outcomes and evolves its decision-making over time." She placed the notebook on the table. Handwritten equations, flowcharts, code fragments, it was a masterpiece. Some of the engineers stood, curiosity piqued. Brian rolled his eyes. "You expect me to believe this?" He turned to the team. "We're not wasting time on janitor scribbles." But Dr. Melissa Young, NeuroShift's lead ethicist, stepped forward. "Actually, this is brilliant. I think it's exactly what we've been missing." One by one, the team gathered around the notebook. Some eyes widened. Others mumbled in disbelief. Helen quietly answered their questions, pointing to the equations, explaining the neural memory framework she'd built. Brian was silent. Over the next 48 hours, they implemented Helen's model. And it worked. It passed the simulation. Every test. Every scenario. The machine learned from emotional memory, not just behavioral patterns. It became more than code, it became a learning mind. NeuroShift's stock exploded. The investors who almost walked away now begged to buy in. Tech blogs hailed the company's breakthrough as the most human AI ever built. But the headlines told a different story than what mattered most. Because in the heart of it all stood Helen. No longer just a janitor. Brian, reluctantly but sincerely, offered her a position as lead ethical architect. She turned it down. Instead, she asked for something else, a new program. One that would train people from all walks of life, especially those who had been left behind by circumstance, to enter the tech world. People like her. People forgotten. He agreed. Months later, Helen ran that program. A quiet room filled with once overlooked minds, learning, growing, believing again. And Brian? He stood in the back, watching her teach, remembering that moment she spoke up. The moment that humbled him. In the end, he didn't remember the lines of code that saved the company. He remembered the woman who dared to speak when no one else would listen. Because sometimes, the greatest wisdom comes not from titles, degrees, or accolades, but from a heart that has lived, broken, and still found the courage to rise and offer light in someone else's darkness. And all it took was for someone to finally ask the janitor, "What do you think?"